Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we sit down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing The Matrix, The Animatrix, The Matrix Reloaded, and The Matrix Revolutions, all directed by the Wachowski sisters. And then we have our newly released film, The Matrix Resurrections, directed by only Lena Wachowski. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. Vincent Daly, how we doing?
Tommy boy, how's it going?
I'd say it's going pretty well. You had a Matrix-filled week, didn't you?
Yes, I did. In preparation for this big release, maybe not big in the box office for Resurrections, but certainly big for a lot of fans of a pretty monumental series. I wanted to give it its just due and return to a lot of these films that, I don't know. I think the critical reception is all over the place, but was very interested to see how they hold up in the modern day.
Yeah, and I like that we're doing that. This is kind of like a mini special. I mean, it could have been its own special, but we threw it in there just because the Resurrections just came out and everything like that. And I think it's good to revisit just the story as a whole. You know what I mean? Instead of going piecemeal. I think it's important that we do that.
Exactly. It was also such a perfect 5 spot too for the episode, much like the Space Jam Suicide Squad episode. It was a perfect fit. Might as well just do it. So.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be good because it's so important. Because revisiting the story, 17 years later, I think it's good just to recap and go through the depth of the characters because the Matrix was so important, and here we are 22 years later or something like that. I think it's good to kind of just roll back and let's set the stage for the entire world that we know the Matrix to be. With that being said, let's start with the first one.
Sure.
99, big movie that came out, very important to us as well. But we have The Matrix.
The Matrix, wow. I think if there was an incentive for me, folks at home, to revisit any of these movies, it was in the fact that I'm always excited to watch this first Matrix. The first Matrix is just such a wonderful slow burn that rises to, just incredible gun fu action heights. It's an amazing time, and definitely going to sound like a broken record when it comes to this one, especially with a lot of critical reception in the many years that this film has been out, but very much lightning in a bottle when it comes to this first Matrix being such a perfect little package.
Yeah.
Certainly has a lot to add to a bigger universe, and we see that expanded upon with the sequels more and more, and that's exciting. I think that as well for me, approaching this new film, if there is going to be any kind of dense universe that is worth revisiting, it's for those sequels, for actually the excitement of rewatching these films. The Matrix, is really a phenomenal time. This, of course, is the story of Thomas Anderson, a.k.a. Neo, his internet handle, and the revelation that the world around him is not as he knows it. And basically diving into what the real horrors are of a world run by machines where humans are farmed for energy, and seeing how we find Neo to maybe not believe his new role, but come to find himself be the one, and in his new role be quite literally a Superman within the Matrix itself.
And I think you when you said lightning in a bottle, I think you hit it exactly right. And one of the things about this movie is that I think just like the Y2K period that this came out, I think just the time it came out made sense too. I think it just all worked in its favor to that importance as well, and the character of Neo.
Absolutely, and I think for science fiction, it's a landmark too. We don't really see the visual style of the very intense design visuals of the machines revisited too much. Obviously, On the Shoulders of Giants, I would definitely say it is inspired by H.R. Giger and a lot of different design cues from sci-fi horror. And in essence, this film does have sci-fi horror in its DNA. I mean, I think the juggling act of the many themes that the original Matrix does, and does them all so exceedingly well, it's why I think the film stands up today, and stands up more importantly for my rating of this film, apart from any of the sequels. I think they're there if you want more of a deep dive, but The Matrix really does stand alone on its own, and I feel that is so important to note for a series that has a lot of lore, a lot of exposition, and it's nice to know that there's something that is standalone for that you can just kind of jump into, and if you like it, guess what? There's more. On that some of that note, I mean, The Matrix for me was always the pitch of the Wachowskis going into the boardroom and showing Ghost in the Shell, showing anime as some of the cyberpunk aspects come into play with this, and the digital world, and introducing that to an audience in 1999 that may not know the anime roots that they were pulling from. It adds a beauty to the machines, and certainly a menacingness of the machines. I think the biggest highlight in this film, and probably my favorite aspect of this series as a whole, are the machines as the antagonist. The fact that they are always designing a perfect maze for us to further and further be entranced in what is clearly a farming effort of human. I mean, that is such a compelling 100% villain. There's no good in there. You know what I mean?
No good. The fact that you don't really see them, they're kind of just it's a faceless thing, and it's just out there, and it's just all controlling. It just adds. It's so ominous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when it comes into why I'm kind of pairing this praise with the stylings of the Matrix and its sources in Ghost in the Shell, and maybe deeper stylings of the time like Genocyber and cyberpunk anime at the time, is because I think it gives striking visuals to the machines, but also so wonderfully communicates why that is scary. Why is this science fiction horror paired within this paranoia drama, this action movie, this there's a lot of things being done in the juggling act of the original Matrix, and I think a lot of that is sold on making a compelling villain so that we always have a baseline to return to for who we know we're up against when the film is juggling a lot of different ways of presenting the world. Neo, definitely Keanu Reeves and his acting as well kind of goes through an evolution. I think it's important to note with that it's still the best adaptation of a very late 80s, 90s anime style in live action form. I really don't think we've seen a better case for this, and the sugar on top, or what brings it all home, is that it sells an idea of possibly one of the most menacing forces or antagonists in kind of a film history, I think. The machines are unmatched because there is no good. It sells what I would normally say everything needs to be speckled. Everything needs to have a little bit of good and bad for being deep. I think it sells it because there is no good in the machines. So it's just such a joy to watch, because I'm one that always roots for the villains, So. But when it comes to, this movie is why I would call this great. Why I would call this a must watch is its slow burn. There's a seduction that happens for both equally Keanu as Thomas Anderson and the audience that brings you into the story slowly. When people think The Matrix, they think action first, but honestly, the best parts of this movie are the tension before the action. It's the drama of Thomas Anderson being powerless in front of Mr. Smith. It's the real stress and the real stakes behind Morpheus and Trinity trying to get Neo out of the Matrix because he is truly just a rat in the maze. You know, there's no guarantee in this film for them to get him out, to pull him out. So that slow burn, I think, is so important. And if it was there to just kind of have a slow introduction to a very heady, very philosophical driven concept world, it'd be one thing, but the film is such a cathartic payoff that it ends in this massive action film, this gung fu masterpiece. I can't tell you how much it works as just being so many things at once and still just maintaining as a baseline a steady plot that is rising and rising and rising until it reaches a point that it doesn't even resemble the first half of the film, but in a very good way that this is about breaking those boundaries. The story itself is about breaking those boundaries, breaking the cage, and the film itself kind of breaks its own cage on what the film is and the genre that it balances. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's also just throughout the movie, it keeps on, the stakes keep on getting higher.
Exactly.
And it's just nice to see you're along for the ride, and it makes a slow burn film so palpable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And engaging.
Yeah, because, I mean, even if you don't know where it's paying off to, if anything, especially if you don't know where it's paying off to, you know, that is where the enjoyment of the film truly is, that you can look back and say, wow, the second half is maybe nothing of the first half, but I've traveled this journey with Thomas Anderson, with Neo, and coming into that, you know. I think when it comes to, if I had to make a graph out of this script, it would be just a sharp slope up until the very end. And if, going back to what I said, if you're going to boil down this movie franchise to just an action movie, you know, if you're going to define the genre of this here, I think I want that is the type of visualization of the script that I want with The Matrix, with any action movie, that there's always just rising climax. We go up and up and up until at the very end, you know. And arguably, even with the conclusion of this film, for folks at home that, of course, have seen this, it really just doesn't stop until the credits, which is phenomenal. It's great. Let's talk about, I think, one of the biggest factors here, which is the special effects. Slow motion, mirror effects, and sunglasses. I think the style works in its own bubble and surprisingly holds up for dated effects. This is going to be a big theme here, folks, for my review of these films, because it kind of unfortunately goes all over the map with the effects and the special effects of what we see, but also the style that very much dates it as late 90s and early 2000s sunglasses, you know, mirror effects into showing Neo through many different lenses. I think it works in its own bubble. I could definitely be really nitpicky with this film and say, that doesn't work anymore. That looks really dated. But honestly, I think, once again, why this film has its own little bubble that it exists in is because I think it sells it with some confidence. There's certainly some goofiness to some scenes, but it sells it in its seriousness. And believe me, this is something that I will return to when talking about our most recent entry in this series. The seriousness of a scene very early on in the film where Thomas Anderson's, Keanu's friends come up and they are this like late 90s rave culture. Their clothing is ridiculous. The sunglasses are ridiculous. The leather is ridiculous. Very much I could look at that and say, oh, that's silly. That doesn't hold up. But I think it works because it is taken so straight-faced serious and is taken in such a way that it doesn't let up while the plot is cranking more and more up as far as the stakes and the horror of what's going on in the reality of this film. I think it works on its own, and that plays over to the CGI. You have a moment where there is any sort of effect of an explosion, of some of the action in this film. It's there, but I really strongly believe it works on its own and in its own bubble. I can't stress that enough, because I think that's only pulled off because it's not trying to make fun of itself. It's almost unabashedly, it knows what it is. They know the type of message they want to get across, and it doesn't hold back at all for that reason.
Yeah, that's a good distinction, because sometimes, so it's not that the effects hold up, but the way they're presented to the audience, it still works. Where some films you go back and watch, and then sometimes you're impressed with how well the effects actually hold up, and it's like, oh my gosh, the effects still to this day hold up, and it makes it great. And then other times you watch and then it ruins it because it's like the effects look terrible. It doesn't seem like they held up great, but they're not terrible. But at the same time, it's still in a unique way. What you're saying is it works.
Absolutely.
It might not you might know that you're looking at something maybe not the best, but it works.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think that strength comes from, again, the understanding of the Wachowskis behind the script on this one, and knowing where they want to go, knowing, almost to a unreal extent, the larger universe, the larger lore, why something would be interacted in this way. I think that confidence comes through in the visual design of this film.
And it's such their baby. You know what I mean? Their DNA's through and through.
For real.
I mean, they wrote it too, as well as it's just their vision for this film. They really took care into putting that onto screen. What they talked about, what was in their heads, and putting it on the screen. Yeah.
And for me, I've always described it as the rule of cool. Sometimes that can be a criticism to some films. Sometimes I think that is the best thing a simple action film can do. I think the beauty of The Matrix is that it very much has the rule of cool and is not making fun of itself for trying to be as cool as ice, arguably, if that holds up in years to come. But I think it really does hold up because it sells the fantasy within its own universe. It sells it within the runtime of one movie.
Yeah, very good.
I think a climb in stakes, or maybe more appropriately, down the rabbit hole, this is just such a great action film, and how the movie evolves and how the movie teases the larger universe at hand and the larger implication of the conflict between humans and machines. It's something that we see expanded upon more and more in the sequels, but more and more in these sequels, we see less and less of what makes The Matrix good. Of what makes it lightning in the bottle. And I think the expansion on that is both good and bad. Obviously, the sequels are a little bit infamous in this series, but I think, once again, while our focus is on The Matrix, it does a balancing act that makes you want to dive deeper into those very heady, very intellectual sides of what these movies become about. But in the meantime, you just get a nonstop action ride, and honestly, I think one of the best films of the 90s, without a doubt. I think something that definitely hits on a must-watch for me, and something that will always be a joy to watch, because at the end of the day, as highbrow as some concepts can be, it is just overwhelmingly enjoyable to watch on screen and watch the ride unfold once again, even though I know exactly where it's going to go. With that said, we will go ahead and give The Matrix an 84.
An 84, a very good score, well-deserving score. I would be angry if it wasn't in the 80s, which I could assume that it was going to be.
Right.
An 84, just right where that should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very good, very good. All right, so we're going to keep that rolling now. And now things get a little bit interesting, because 2003, came out in 99, The Matrix. Then we have the Animatrix, The Matrix Reloaded, and Revolutions all coming out within the same year.
I know.
I totally forgot about that, how you have Reloaded and Revolutions literally in the same calendar year. That's wild. But we're going to go ahead and do the Animatrix first, which we kind of build being directed by the Wachowski sisters, which it pretty much is, but it's also, there's a lot of other directors involved with this.
Yes.
And which works in, how does that work out, Vin?
Sure. So this is an anthology, a collection of short short stories, short films, and all anime. I think right off the back, this is very cool to see the Wachowskis collaborate with probably a lot of what the source material was for their inspiration of this story. Directors like Shinichiro Watanabe of Cowboy Bebop, the director of Aeon Flux, Studio Madhouse. I mean, these are heavy hitters, superstars in anime and in Japanese animation. I think it's probably a perfect time to get the cat out of the bag on this one. I want to suggest a watching list. Folks at home, if you are completely new to The Matrix, or maybe even want to do a similar deep dive into watching and doing the homework before watching the new ones, which is basically what I did, I want to suggest that it's watching The Matrix, jump to Animatrix, and then actually marathon 2 and 3, Reloaded and Revolutions, in one sitting. And I'll get into, obviously, the 2 and 3, but why I would layer Animatrix in between is because when you watch The Matrix, it gets you the elevator pitch of the machines. Gets you the elevator pitch of how menacing they truly are. Animatrix, a lot of these short stories are presented from the machines as propaganda within their own society.
That's
very, very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I love that people might question why we have it on this list. Like, why aren't we just doing the actual films that we know? But for this reason, it works. And you have the Wachowski sisters ingrained in it, you know, and they're still part of the, they're big writers of it as well.
Oh, absolutely.
It really does go hand, and people don't realize it. This Animatrix really does go hand in hand with those original 3 that we know, and with Reloaded and Revolutions. But it's interesting you say, again, it all came out in the same year, but really this came out in between Reloaded and Revolutions, correct?
I believe in between Reloaded Revolutions, or actually side by side with Reloaded. Very quick succession when it was released.
Okay, but you say go ahead and watch this first to get the perspective of the machines, and that way we have it's set up. Now we have a better understanding of the machines, kind of. We have that.
Yes.
But also, and then we have the original Matrix movie, which really sets the stage for this world.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I think if even if you stop at The Matrix, Animatrix is still worth a watch because for a couple things, we have some of the absolute best 90s style, late 90s style anime you can watch on display. And in short segments that if you're not an anime fan, you're not really going to get bogged down with heavy exposition writing and things that I would say maybe are hard to sell anime with. Instead, you're just going to see a masterclass and a wonderful sampling of what late 90s animation is by some of my favorite directors, but also, I mean, just undoubtedly who are the superstars now.
Like you said, the heavy hitters.
Absolutely. Madhouse is so huge, and the fact that they have, I believe, 2 short stories in this is amazing to watch. You know,
very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I would actually go so far to say as this compilation of films would be the best single dose of 90s anime if you wanted to kind of dive into what that styling looks like, what type of stories and what type of dark stories they tell in that type of animation style. This is a wonderful single dose shot for that.
Would you almost say, I mean, this came out in 2003, but would you say this wraps up the best of the best when it comes to 90s anime?
I think so, yeah, because the studios and the directors that the Wachowskis are working with on this under very strict supervision for making sure that it fits within to their very particular lore and the world and the universe of the Matrix. It is still such a great display of the stylings that inspired the Matrix in the first place.
Yeah.
It really is phenomenal short stories. Some of the design is just such a delight to watch on screen because it is just cool as ice.
Are the designs different per short story, or do they stick with the same animation style?
Definitely different animation styles, and I think if as far as anthologies go, like short story collections, I think anime anthologies are some of my favorite to watch because they're so drastically different. You definitely do bring up a good point, though, because as far as criticism of this film, CGI is a little bit of hit or miss. I will say that I think it's on par for the time and the series, especially for the CGI we see in Reloaded.
Okay.
And sometimes it's pushed a little bit too far. The last story in particular is exclusively CGI, which is a little rough. But that last story, though it is actually important to some of what's going on behind behind the scenes and actually what is introduced as a plot device in Reloaded, it is the last short film among 9 short movies or nine short segments that are just such heavy hitters as far as working on concept, working on animation, working on rule of cool, just being a absolute delight to look at, impactful, especially if you're engaged in the universe of the Matrix. I mean, really,
that right there is the most important.
Yeah,
there's gonna be a lot of listeners who's just like don't feel like watching an animation type thing, and also if you want to watch the Matrix, a lot of people are just gonna go to the Matrix. But the fact is, the reason why this is on this list really is because it adds to the world, and it's important to almost have that included with.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
this could very easily be supplemental material that you don't have to necessarily dive into. I would say Animatrix is one of the few exceptions where I really do think it's required viewing, not only for one of these short films kicking off the main plot device of 2 and 3, Reloaded and Revolutions, which is the assault on the main city Zion, but on top of that as well. I mean, just a delight, such an understanding of the machines, and again, cranks up that menacing aspect that is just so iconic to their relentless hatred of humans. And I love it to death.
Building on the villain and just building on the story itself in the world. I think it's awesome. And you had mentioned it's 9 short films. It's only an hour and 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
So it's really just little bite-sized pieces, but great content and added depth to the world, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think the pillars here are near required watching for the series. I think wonderful writing from the Wachowskis, and the biggest pillar for me, just some of the most rock star animation you can see from Japanese anime.
That's awesome.
In one spot, too. You know what I mean? I'm not saying, oh, well, you got to watch this series and you got to watch this series. No, it's all right there.
Yeah,
you can just do a quick dip in the pool, and you can experience some of the coolest anime that there is. So
I love that. That's awesome. And the fact that it's the Wachowski sisters have such a big, it's not just like rubber stamping, like, okay, we're cool with this. No, it's like they had the hand. That's why we're including them as really the directors.
Absolutely.
Because the anime companies that are involved in this, or the studios, like there are dedicated directors to these shorts, but as you said, they had a huge role, the sisters, which is probably why it helps with the depth and everything and the importance as well.
For sure. Yeah, because very easily, this could be in other anthologies, especially anime anthologies, directors just running wild. This is very much supervised with Wachowskis, and better for that reason as well, given more significance. But I think the appreciation of the concepts in this universe, nearly every film of our 9 adds a piece to the puzzle, some very important to the coming movies, and some, no joke, are still being called back to in the most recent movie. That is how important this is to the lore that they crafted. This is how important this film is to the narrative that the Wachowskis obviously know for the arc for these characters. And on top of it being such a great snapshot of late 90s to early 2000s anime, really, I'm coming out very positive with this. I think this is such a cool watch and such a palatable dive into anime, where otherwise, if I told you all these directors, all these studios, you'd have a laundry list of things to watch. This is one shot, and you get it all done. We're going to go ahead and give the Animatrix a 77.
Yeah, a great score. A really, really great score. And I think that's a fair score for the every person. Like, again, because I'm not the big, when it comes to anime for me, I'm very picky.
Sure.
I am very, not reserved with what I watch, but I'm very picky with what I'm going to choose to sit down with. And if you wrote a list of, like, these are the best studios, here are each work that you should watch from these studios, it's like, I would never, ever do it.
Exactly. It's too much. But guess what? It's all right in one spot. And that's
why that 77 is awesome.
Yeah.
Where I think this is a great every person score. And the fact, again, it's awesome that it actually adds and gives you more depth into the world. And it's not laziness. It's not just like, let's create some fun stories in the world. It's like, no. Like, this is important, actually. There's things you're learning. And the fact that there's callbacks to the most recent one, which I had no idea. I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah, that's so cool. So, again, I guess Vince suggests watch that first and then kind of go back to back, which is almost like how they came out anyway. They both came out the same year, but Reloaded did come out first in spring. spring of '03. So let's go ahead and do The Matrix Reloaded.
There we go. So, yeah, this alternate watching list, I have to give credit to my one buddy Jesse for because he's a huge Matrix fan, and after watching them this way, I really do agree with this, especially for Reloaded and Revolutions. How Reloaded ends is a little bit of a cliffhanger, so much so that they actually put a to be continued, which I kind of found outrageous.
Okay. Oh, really?
I just haven't seen a to be continued for a while in an actual film.
Okay, all right.
And obviously this came out back then, but when it comes to this, I think the watching Matrix and Animatrix, that's much more of the deep dive way. I would recommend, especially if you're skipping Animatrix, absolutely watch Reloaded and Revolutions back to back in some sort of marathon. This picks up, I would say not maybe near future, but there definitely has been some time pass with Neo and crew. And furthermore, we're jumping into a much more complicated world of now Neo is in this full role as the One, and with his crew of the Nebuchadnezzar. Am I remembering that ship name correctly?
That sounds
Morpheus
right. Yep.
and Trinity. They are getting more involved with the deeper parts of the Matrix itself. That includes more interesting, eccentric programs, maybe that represent and increase our understanding of what a program is, the emotions associated with the program, the aspirations of a program. There's definitely a humanism that comes through with the new characters introduced, which I think is really interesting. The main threat that is introduced here for the third movie and for the second movie actually comes from the last short in the Animatrix, Last Flight of the Osiris. And then once again, it's just more evidence for that alternative watching order. Does that make sense? Especially...
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if your main threat is introduced in one of those short films, I think once again, evidence to move that from supplemental to required watching.
Yeah.
Probably the best time to see this film was on release because, boy, did this only get worse with age. I think Reloaded has a real bad rap, if I'm being fair, because I think there's a lot of very highbrow things they try to do with the script and the exposition, but most importantly to that palatability of the film, and probably the most I've experienced in a long time of, hey, this was probably great when it came out, but has only kind of gotten a little bit worse with aging. It's in that CGI. There is, I think, the ultimate example is the multiple Smiths scene. There is definitely a appreciation to the fight choreography. Certainly, it's very cool. They are still operating by that rule of cool, the Wachowskis, as far as what they're introducing and the type of scenes. It's almost, very fanfare. It's giving people what they want to see, but it just does not age and just looks very goofy. Why this is such a big point for me is that it chips away at this film taking itself seriously, because when the moment it lets off the gas, the cracks start to form. It is some of the jokes that Neo says in between fight scenes. There's a lot more here that I think is fine for a sequel to have, but more and more it creates a harder sell for the very serious inner lore that is dumped on the audience in this film in heavy exposition. It's a mismatch. You can't have this film not be 100% down with what it's putting out there, especially for how much is put out there for its world, how the machines work, how the Matrix works itself, and the very, very big arc that Neo as the One is taking.
So would you say that it's not making fun of itself, right? But it's bringing a lightness into it, which is taking you out of the seriousness that really is what it should be. It's a very serious thing going on, and it's billed as a serious film franchise just based off the first Matrix.
Yep.
Where it's getting looser, it's getting funnier. It's getting it's lessening its seriousness. Is that right?
Yes, it's lessening the impact 100%, and I think specifically to my CGI note here, it makes the CGI possibly not work, where in the first one it worked because it was what it was and it had no questions about what it was, where in this one where Neo says, they have upgrades, and then we have a action sequence that's probably some of the goofiest CGI could ever point to, I think it hurts itself as the film ages for that reason. It gives up its dedication to being just cool as ice about the world it's producing, or it's spotlighting for the audience.
So it's the fact that, again, it's not that the CGI holds up visually in the first one. Mm-hmm. It's the way the characters are going about living in the film that creates a realism.
More so, it's the commitment that the film has that these characters presumably are seeing, I don't know if you want to say presumably seeing the same effects or something like that. I think let me track that back a little. I think it's more so it's the commitment of the artists, the Wachowskis here, creating a film that it knows what it is and it is still unrelentlessly not giving up that rule of cool. That's the first one.
Okay.
In this one and future sequels, more and more that pot gets muddied because we're now weaving in a lot of lore, some bad dated CGI, and some jokiness, and I think it messes up the formula.
Okay, yeah, for sure, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's important to note, kind of a tough comment to make, because ultimately, I mean, what film isn't going to maybe benefit from watching it closer to release? But
but it's true, and there is something to this CGI, especially in 2003. There's a huge jump in use of CGI from pre-2000, 99 to 2003. Things were really kicking into gear in 2003, Absolutely. And everyone was trying to get in on it. And it's just like, not in the early days, I can't say early days of CGI, but as far as like, it was really starting to be heavily used.
Oh, for sure.
And it's tough.
And maybe you can point to The Matrix as an offender of that. You know what I mean? That they need to put more and more in. They were excited with the technology. Unfortunately, some of it didn't age too well.
Exactly. So. Yeah. It's an overuse as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a big topic here for Reloaded specifically is it's all of what the first Matrix has right in areas, but it's missing that graph. It's missing that illustration that it's just a steady climb in the story that I talked about in Matrix 1. Instead, we are doing some scene hopping. We are obviously discovering a lot more about the real world and how humans exist in the real world. And that's not necessarily the worst part, but it does slow it down significantly and not necessarily progresses. It doesn't necessarily progress in the same kind of slow burn way that you're always moving forward. There's very much some halts that happen in it, and unfortunately we see this more and more in the sequels of the films, that the movie or the script is so concerned with the lives and the society of what the humans are doing in this sci-fi story that we get away from the simplicity of Matrix 1. What halts that further, specifically for Reloaded, is the philosophical babble or kind of white noise in a way that is in exchange for some of the concepts we see in Matrix 1. Even if I had to give the elevator pitch for it, Matrix 1 has a very streamlined, simple look at reality, a Descartes kind of singular focus. What is choice, what is causality, and the Reloaded just tries to amp up those talking points, that highbrow script, and does it in just a bad way in a couple ways. One, the exposition is in a bad way like an anime. It is just dumps of dialogue where Keanu is not necessarily the best one to toss the lines back and forth.
Yeah.
So
there's tough.
Yeah, there's that, but I also think the expansion on the philosophical aspects of the Matrix and even the machines and whatnot, there's cool stuff done from a nerd perspective. I think it is almost weaker in every way because of how it's introduced, the concepts themselves, and more importantly, and probably most importantly, of how it's delivered in these just massive dialogue dumps where the recipient of this is both us and Keanu. And that's where even some of the cracks fall in Keanu's performance.
Yeah, okay.
So, if for those that have seen this film, I'm of course referring to The Architect in that type of dialogue dump. That is what I'm referring to, that the roots of anime in this series are taken in a bad way, where the design-wise, beautiful, wonderfully executed in a live-action form. Script-wise, that's not where we should be looking to for inspiration, because it becomes a little bit too heady and definitely halts any sort of fun action pacing that we saw in the first one.
Okay,
so
that's fair.
When it comes to what we're looking at here with these films, I want to end with talking about the obvious. This is 100% an action film, which is not something I can say of the sequel, the third one, Revolutions, and for that, I think this film, in a nutshell, could rank higher than the third one for me, because it is still an action film. It is 100% an action film, but it's losing that slow burn aspect as it incorporates some very slow points to the script and how the film is produced, the events on screen. By all accounts, the action, the set pieces, the concept, it's all amped up. The Wachowskis are coming back, and everything is amped up in this, but in somewhere it muddies itself and it loses what made the action in the first Matrix so important, because of the absence of that action. The reason why we have a shootout being such an impact on screen is because for the first half of the film, we have the absence of that in the first Matrix. When there is 100% action in the second one in Reloaded, it's weaker as a whole.
It's a saturation.
Exactly.
It's a saturation. And like you said in the first one, the best parts in the first one aren't necessarily those action moments anyway. It's actually those quieter moments when you're getting depth, you're getting emotion, you're getting feel for the world, you're getting that drama in there a little bit more that doesn't have to be action. And so now you have an oversaturation, it sounds like, of action completely, where now the action isn't even as good as it was, and you're losing those great slow burn moments that add depth to the film. It's what it sounds like,
Yeah, it's just it's a little bit overwhelming for that reason, and well, maybe not overwhelming, but yeah, I think you actually hit the nail on the head with saturation. That is a perfect term for what this is here. And again, I can't stress enough, all of this is amped up. I think this is probably a dream sequel for the fans seeing it in 2003, but it really hurts now, especially looking at how well Matrix 1 has held up.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. With that said, we will go ahead and give The Matrix Reloaded a 54.
Ooh, 54, a little bit more harsh than I thought, but the second one is known for being, it's not that it's a joke, but as far as the Matrix goes, it's a little bit of the the ugly stepchild or whatever. And I think that's how people view it. I think a 54 makes sense. Yeah, it's a shame because it was a lot more of the non-best parts of the normal Matrix. You know what I mean?
It's a perfect example of more of everything that works doesn't necessarily equate to it working at a higher level.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
There's just almost.
I think that's a great one sentence to sum it up. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, so that's that's Reloaded with 54%. Well, again, okay, so this came out in spring.
Okay.
Now we're out in kind of fall for the big fall release, and same year in 03, we have The Matrix Revolutions.
Yes.
And you're suggesting pair these movies up together. Watch the Animatrix, come back, and then do Reload and Revolutions pretty much together, which is pretty much what the studio did. As far as release goes, you don't get big-time titles in the same year.
Absolutely. I wonder if it was in the original marketing. I can't per se I remember just off of, just trying to think back. But yeah, I mean, it ends with the to be continued, so I think that's my really all the evidence I need for this type of watching order.
Right.
Not only that, it really does benefit from it. One of the biggest factors with Matrix Revolutions is we have almost a very singular focus on the real world. The Matrix, the simulation itself, very much takes a backstage. We do, of course, have time spent in the Matrix, but everything of the world building in these films, especially connected to Zion as a city and the people involved and the politics that Morpheus and crew exist in, it all comes to a head here. And as a conclusion, I think this works more than it doesn't. But I think as a major criticism, what I'm saying here, folks, is that the fact that we have very little Matrix in the Matrix is once again, it's so odd that this film goes in yet another direction off of that original Lightning in a Bottle, where Reloaded was an amp up of everything we know Matrix to be. Revolutions is almost very little of what we know Matrix to be in an entirely different movie for that reason. It feels very much like a Return of the Jedi. It feels very much like it has pressure behind it on making a conclusion out of something. And not necessarily bad, but not what you're signing up for the Matrix for. And I think that's why this movie equally got a lot of criticism at the time. Much like Reloaded got the criticism, this got criticism for a different reason.
That's interesting. And well, first of all, as far as Reloaded ending and Revolutions picking up, what's the time gap in between these films?
I'm pretty sure immediate. Yeah, I'm
Is
pretty
it like
sure
direct scene almost? Or?
Yeah, it is direct scene because if I'm thinking the opening sequence, we basically just check in back at the farm, back at Zion, where the ending of Matrix 1 was on the ship, I believe.
Okay.
If I'm correct, yeah. Either way, this is very, very
Yeah, we're picking right back.
Yeah.
So another thing is with that, so does it almost feel like Reloaded was meant to... They both amp things up from The Matrix, for sure, from the original movie. Do you think that Reloaded was supposed to be an amp up in the Matrix world itself, and then Revolutions was supposed to spotlight amping up the kind of the real world, or no? This is just their version of the continuation of a story. Not that they're side by side,
right?
But this really is a continuation, and we're focusing on something completely different for this.
I think that's a wonderful way to go about it. I think that's a very generous way to look at these movies. So I actually love that, what you're proposing there, because it really is two sides of the coin. We get amped up inside the simulation, and then we get amped up real world.
Right.
So I think, again, that's definitely... there's more enjoyment to pairing these films than not pairing these films.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But I can't necessarily get away from... I mean, let me put it this way. If I'm going to put such credence and such praise towards Matrix 1 standing on its own, these films are a little bit inherently flawed if they need each other to succeed. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. It's very much like whatever these scores turn out to be, no matter what, had they been one long movie, it would be overall a better score.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about a little bit some performances, because I think that's been light, and Hugo Weaving is such a delight on screen. He is so great as Mr. Smith, and if anything, this last movie is really Mr. Smith's, or Agent Smith rather, Agent Smith's time to shine, because he's gaining power in the Matrix, and it's just building up for a moment that we have just this such a cathartic, such a fanfare of a last moment between Neo and Agent Smith. It really is great. He's totally hamming it up. I mean, I think probably everyone has seen the meme of him laughing maniacally in the kitchen, but it is really a delight to watch him on screen, because he's truly some of the best aspects of all these films, I think, in his performance, and it goes so much more deeper than just selling a face to the menacing machines, because by this time in the story, Agent Smith is basically a third force. He's apart from machines. So I think it's important to note that he stands on his own, and he brings such a fun energy to this big action film, and you can just see that he's having fun with it as well.
Yeah.
I think this type of performance, specifically in Revolutions, is the one that always makes me ask, why don't I see Hugo Weaving in more stuff? You know what I mean? He's obviously got big roles in Lord of the Rings, and I
think about it constantly.
I know.
Even when I just think of The Matrix, it's part of it is just like, where is he?
Yeah,
Where is Hugo? Where is Hugo Weaving? You bring up the Lord of the Rings, by the way. He wasn't even supposed to be Elrond.
Oh, really?
They asked Sam Neill first, and then he turned it down because he was doing Jurassic Park film.
Wow.
Turned it down he was doing Jurassic Park 3 or something like that.
Oh man. But
yeah, where is he? He's so enjoyable in this film.
I know. Maybe we'll have to do a Hugo special. So,
I mean, think about his big. If you even know any other thing he's in besides Lord of the Rings, it would probably be Cloud Atlas, which is again
true.
The Wachowski sisters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know. Maybe it's just one of those things that he has no interest in working with anyone else, or But
when we look, I'm sure he's got a pretty big filmography.
Yeah, definitely the best part about this. Let's talk about the CGI a little bit. CGI is oddly better. This is I was scratching my head so much because in researching this and researching the production that they're releasing the same year, how can the CGI look so laughably bad in Reloaded and passable in months later? I mean, it's the same technology. They're probably using the same everything.
Well, months in between release.
Cooking in the book?
It could be months of release, but it could be many months or much longer in between actual shooting of the films.
Right.
And when it comes to the editing, I mean, when it comes to CGI technology, that it was moving.
That's true. That's true.
Quick. Yeah. Again, Lord of the Rings. Look at 2001 to 2003.
Yep.
You do have that gap between 99 and 03. Between The Matrix and then Reloaded. That could have been filmed earlier. I mean, we could easily find out, too. I mean, we kind of just do this because it's about the movie score.
Yeah.
We're watching the movie for how it is.
Absolutely.
But as far as, time of filming, there could have been actually a decent gap. And back in early 2000s, when it comes to CGI, that's a lifetime.
Yeah.
As far as, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I
think that's a good point, too, because CGI could be cooking in the oven for a lot longer, too, than even if they filmed it. That could be worked on for quite much longer of a time, while they're editing stuff. And,
exactly. So who knows? I mean, it could have been the fact that, who knows? It's all speculation. I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, there's answers on it, I'm sure. I mean, it's
sure.
old. It's such a big movie. I'm sure there's answers. But for you and I just talking about it now, I mean, it could be the fact of they had the movie pretty much ready to go, Reloaded, and then they were like, no, these should be coming out the same year.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so they really could have been in the can for a while, but who knows? It's funny how different you say it is.
It's night and day. And maybe to your point, let's just talk about the movie that while you're watching it, what's coming at you. I think probably the conscious effort is that the sequences that the CGI is used in, and it's a lot used almost exclusively in this film because it's focused on kind of one setting, one set piece in a way, one kind of main conclusion. I think probably the biggest help is lighting is a little darker. It's kind of classic. If you have a darker picture, that digital effect is going to look a little bit better or age a little bit better.
Sure.
And I think if I had to just judge it, all production talk aside, I think it works better because of a conscious effort to maybe put the CGI in a setting in the the stage dressings of where it's going to naturally look better. It's playing to its strengths.
Right.
So, but this is Revolutions is a drastic turn away of what we know a Matrix movie to be. There is very little kung fu. There is not a lot of the Matrix simulation, the Matrix fantasy of that. It does become kind of a sci-fi romp adventure. Like I said before, this gives me very Star Wars vibes. More than any other time in this.
Interesting.
In this trilogy, and that was something put out there for the marketing of the Matrix, that it was kind of that generation Star Wars. For me, that really drives home here in this film. It's not what we know the Matrix to be, so it's definitely a criticism, but at the same time, it's not dipping too low because it's becoming a little bit dumber, it's becoming a little bit more surface level, but it also just kind of works for that reason. It's passable, I guess would be the word.
Okay.
Because it's ultimately it's just having the change in what the story is about and what the story is structured around. It's not trying to be Matrix 1. Instead, it's just trying to yield home all of the story plot lines that they've been building for 2 movies, and in that, it's kind of like, all right, it's a conclusion. What I always talk about with Tom, folks, is the razzle dazzle. If a blockbuster is going to try to, if it's a mess, but it ends with a razzle dazzle, it's just sell you on it. So when you're walking out of the theater, you feel good. That's this film. It's just a conclusion to it. So I feel like passable, though it's not necessarily praise. I think that's where I land with this film as far as the feeling. The design work of the machines gets expanded expanded upon. That's a big highlight for me. Again, I think there is just an incredible job of making a live-action version of these anime stylings, that especially what we see in the Animatrix. Some of the very cool machine designs of the Second Renaissance. Very, very awesome to see that in live action or with the CGI. And other than that, I think the conclusion here is that for Neo and for the world as a whole, though there is some DNA of what we know the Matrix to be as far as how the movie feels, it is bringing it around home for the story threads and the many, many concepts introduced to this trilogy, and it is only passable because the trilogy is hurt by its own scale. I can't stress enough. I mean, Matrix 1 stands so strong on its own, and if I have a common thread in Reloaded and Revolutions is that it just tries to up the scale in such a way, and I think it kind of crumbles a little bit under its own weight. Maybe not to the point that it's terrible, but certainly not to the point that it's great. We will go ahead and give The Matrix Revolutions a 58.
A 58, yeah.
Which might be controversial. The fact that...
Ooh, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm looking at these scores and it makes sense. Because I remember, I don't know, even like I was younger when I saw them, but watch them in the movies and how I felt about them, especially even just like a couple years after and getting a little bit more perspective. This is how I think I viewed the movies at the time, even.
Yeah.
Just that third one a little bit better than the second one. I think that's fair. I think that makes sense. As you say, passable, like, okay, this got things that give it a bit of a nod and just a tick up above Reloaded.
Exactly. And honestly, very hard to even compare the movies because they're just so drastically different, as the stories they're trying to tell.
Right, yeah.
So.
Okay. Not necessarily, I don't think that's the most shocking thing, at 58 there on the Revolutions. So before we go to, we jump 17 years, and we go to Resurrections, we're going to go ahead and do our producer segment here. This is when we just want to let everybody know here, Vin and I, we host this show. You all help produce through monetary donations. You can go to the donations tab at thedailyratings.com, and any small, big, large, tiny amount that you would want to give to us, we would greatly appreciate anything. We just appreciate it so much because... it's you guys helping producing and keeping this show going. It's a big deal. You get an official producer credit. We can vouch for that. And the biggest thing is, it's feedback for us as well. You go ahead and donate something. You can write a note to us. We read it on the air in this producer segment. And, very much like the way you went about watching Animatrix and Reloading Revolutions came from your buddy Jesse. Like any producer wants to write in and give
certainly,
just tips like that or something like that. If you want to go ahead and donate a full $500 and become a director, go ahead and pick a movie for Vin to watch or something like that.
Sure.
Just that kind of stuff. And again, that $500 can be. It doesn't have to be in one donation. If we're still doing this 5 years from now and you want to donate just a little bit every week or month or whatever, 5 donations, one a year. But if you get to the point of doing $500, you get, an established directorship kind of credit to your name from us. And you can make up a name for yourself if you want or whatever. There's some perks that come to that. But yeah, so it's fun. We're having a really good time doing this. I think all of you are going to be, enjoying it and kind of on this journey with us together. We're starting a little tribe, a little family together. And again, we appreciate any support you all can give us. Now, with that said, we're going to keep it going. This is our now playing film. And we're going to go ahead and end it on The Matrix Resurrections. And
The Matrix, a doozy. This is a doozy of a film.
Yeah, okay. And it's The Matrix Resurrections, and the weird thing about this one is it's not both sisters here directing, and it's only Lana Wachowski. She has a hand in it in writing, like she did before, but there's also 2 other writers as well, Alexander Hammond and David Mitchell. So there's a bit of a mix-up when it comes to creating, writing, and directing this.
I think that's a great way to note it as well, Tom, because, I mean, if there's been anything defining even us just talking about these movies is that it's just so much the Wachowski's DNA. Like, this is their baby.
It is. The entire thing is, because it should be said. I mean, we mentioned on The Matrix, I think, but they wrote this as well. They wrote Reloaded and they wrote Revolution.
Yeah,
so it's
absolutely.
Important to note.
So this is a doozy of a film, folks. In good, in bad ways. I think a couple things I want to note before diving into this. One, I always try tried to do the best job possible at staying away from spoilers. If my rating is going to be a watching guide, and preferably in the most use of it is before you see a film, I think that's very important that I stay away from those things. There are going to be some elements here that I think take away from some of the punch, but it's almost unavoidable in talking about. So just know my dedication is, as a very big fan of this series, I think what I talk about is safe spot, at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Some of the production of this is interesting. Warner Brothers apparently was going to do this regardless. There is an interview coming out with Lana that she said for her this was a kind of a therapeutic revisiting to the series. I think it's a little bit odd because there is a confliction in, well, was it going to be something that she was going to make, or rather Warner Brothers was going to make regardless, and then she was forced into this? I don't know for me if that matters too much into this film, but I think there is kind of a little bit of a glaring issue that one of the Wachowskis, so integral to this story and this franchise, is missing from this. No less the muddied of the different writers and everything like that. So this is, of course, the return of where we left off with the Matrix world. There is a little bit of a time jump with this, but mainly the main elevator pitch that will hopefully draw audiences into this is that for some reason we have a resubmerging into the Matrix simulation for our characters, most notably Neo and Trinity. I was pretty hyped for this. I really do like The Matrix as a franchise for so many multiple reasons. I understood a little bit of the track record with the Wachowskis. Tom and I always say, we enjoy Cloud Atlas, but Jupiter Ascending, it's been kind of winding down a little bit. But so I would say healthy distance with my hype, but when seeing the trailer, I could not help but to theory craft and what may be happening around the Matrix and what lands Neo in here again. So there is some genuine excitement with this film and returning to this. It's not...
And nerves. I mean, watching that trailer, you had some serious nerves and reservations.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think
the Matrix reservations. That's what it should have been called.
Reservations.
Yeah.
That's great. I just think, I don't know, almost in line with what I talked about with some of that pre-production stuff and only one Wachowski and yada yada. I still think it was exciting to see them bring out this intellectual property back out of, back into the spotlight. I did not feel like it was too much of a cash grab, which I think is important for bringing something back like this. However, I'm very sad to say this is just very plainly not a good movie, folks. And I think the cornerstone or the keystone of my criticism here is going to be on much how this was a kind of a watching order for the Matrix series. What good does this have to lend to your experience of this series? Is this worth a watch, even if you've watched all these movies so far? Let's talk about the script a little bit, because this is probably one of the more jarring elements. The script is super, super meta. It is very self-aware, very fourth wall breaking. This is a environment where the Matrix itself is referenced to within this film as the film. And I, not that it means anything, I'll go put a pat on my back. My fan theory crafting, for whatever good it was worth, which is nothing, was right on the money. I was excited for this evolution in the story and the examination of the Matrix, of how the machines, after everything we experienced from the original trilogy, how were we seducing Neo, the one, once again, to get back servile to the machines. And I think it was exciting to see slowly it collapses, and I really mean collapses more and more through the film. I think I'm going to give it straight up here. Your enjoyment of this film very much hinges on how much you enjoy / tolerate fourth wall breaking stories. I personally enjoyed the ideas that are introduced here, but I think like almost a theme with this entire series. There are interesting ideas. There are the execution of those ideas, and they are not executed well upon. They are not executed in a way that I think adds value, and if anything, really detracts from the seriousness, from the rule of cool that we've been talking about. I think it
does it detract from Neo himself?
Yeah. But that's going you're going to tempt me. I can't go spoilery.
I'm just talking broad here.
I think overall, the type of fourth wall breaking script that this is, very self-referential. One, it's a little self-congratulatory. This was a big turnoff because I'll use more of a kind of a hypothetical example. If something is referencing itself and saying that it is a masterpiece work, landmark, and then that doesn't live up to that masterpiece landmark, I think it's just self-congratulatory. I don't think that type of meta screenwriting is useful, and I think it really does not follow through on why it needs to reference itself in such a way. To call its own source material legendary in many different ways is almost a self-inflicted wound when the movie itself is terrible. And I think it really...
It's very off-putting.
Yeah.
Very off-putting.
It's off-putting because it's really cool what they're doing with the ideas, especially in the first act. I think it's everything I wanted out of my initial excitement of seeing this come back and what they were doing with the story. But it's just done in such a non-Matrix way, and just does not feel like again, not to sound like a broken record, but the rule of cool that the film franchise has lived and died on. On top of that as well, it just I think the script it's too self-congratulatory. Everything is a callback, and none of the satire has follow through. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah. Flashback City. That's the note, folks. Honestly, this movie goes at not a breakneck pace, but when you're in that first act and experiencing what the Matrix has become, there is a near constant bombardment of flashbacks to the original series. This is done very poorly. If I really want to be critical here and get my knives out, I think this is plain lazy editing. It is padding out otherwise boring scenes, boring cinematography, boring dialogue moments, and padding it out with callbacks that do nothing but to get everyone on the same page, where otherwise it might be a deep cut. Otherwise, it may be enjoyable for the true fans of the series. But most importantly, to my criticism, it does nothing for the greater appreciation for any audience member, fan of The Matrix or not. Because the callbacks, the flashbacks to what is done, it's just done in such a incredibly lazy way, and almost like a no-duh type of way, the type of things they decide to call back to create this thematic tie to the original Matrix. Very just to condense unnecessary. It's unnecessary on a story level, and I think, again, if I really want to get my knives out here, downright lazy and uninspired as far as an editing and technical level on the film.
Okay.
I would say I'll probably bring this up as more and more we see franchises dug out of the ground and and back on stage. But what I would point to here in a balancing act of rewarding fans, creating literacy for new watchers to understand what the hell's going on in the film, and rewarding, just overall calling back to the original work as a sequel, I point to Blade Runner 2049. It's not because it's a perfect sequel, believe me. I have a lot of problems with the film, but it balances catch-up story and rewarding fans, and does not put anything in your face. It's there if you want it. Guess what? It doesn't hinge on it if it doesn't matter to you.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. But also, it's not lacking so much where it is still quite a joy.
Yes.
To immerse yourself in that film in 2049. There's something added to having that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's just bottom line. It's this script being so self-referential. It's calling back into itself.
It was really bothering you.
It needs it. It takes that type of enjoyment and almost makes it integral to, do you understand the script? And I think that's really a bad pitfall for the story. As cool as the ideas are introduced and as very postmodern the script is in a lot of ways, it just does not stick the landing. Let's talk about the performances.
Okay.
Ooh, I'm losing it. We need some caffeine. Performances are all over the place. Script is particularly bad and cringy in parts, like noticeably so. No joke. I think this might be the worst performance we've seen from Keanu in a while. And I'm not even just talking about acting. I'm talking about physical performance. The fact that I think Keanu got away with stealing a check, honestly, here. It is laughable when you consider how much physical preparation Keanu does for the John Wick series and what the action is represented in this film. It is laughable.
Yeah.
Keanu got a free check. and believe me, Thomas Anderson, Neo, it is a character meant to a little bit be like a blank slate. Certainly that calls back to some of the anime influences in how this series is written. But yeah, just real bad. And it ties into just the action being real bad. Let's focus on a highlight. I think Jessica Henwick. She plays the character Bugs, the blue hair one. if you have no interest in seeing this, I think she is the only good new actor here. It is
the only, really.
Oh yeah. I think she is great on screen, and I will obviously talk about my worst fears towards the end of this review, but if this is going to lead into more Matrix movies, I will enjoy not only seeing her character, but the actress as well, and what she can do on screen.
A silver lining. You would say
yes,
a silver lining.
A silver, very small. It's sterling silver necklace on a big poopy amulet. A big poopy medallion. Everyone else, I think, is hurting the seriousness of the plot. And I can reference two characters very specifically, but I think that's where I'm at the boundary of spoiler talk and whatnot. And especially if you're going into this movie blind, there is maybe some enjoyment in the creation of these characters, especially conceptually, but everyone else robs, and I really mean that, robs from the simplicity of this movie knowing it's cool as ice, and goes into this movie thinks it's probably cool as ice. There's no confidence in the execution, and that, I think, is my problem with a lot of these new characters and really the story as a whole. If I had to criticize it, martial arts, gunfights, the machines, the design. I talked about the machine design and how much I loved it in all of these movies. All of this is a step down and uninspired. There is a machine that it looks like a bird in this. It totally misses the point of the machines hating anything human and anything living, biotic. You know what I mean? It's just oh my god, it's just it's so bad. Keanu, as far as the action, ends fights not with kung fu, but like this blast. He sticks his two hands out. I would challenge any viewer of this not to laugh when it happens the third, no less probably the seventh time in the film. But I think my criticism here, just to kind of dial this in here, the action has very little stakes, and I think that is represented in how Keanu and the entire cast delivers the action. I am never you watch this film, I am never in fear of anyone dying. I never think that there is any stakes behind the action. We are just going through the motions. In that, it felt very Marvel. It felt probably where original Matrix is timeless. This felt very, very modern blockbuster movie where it's just an action gallery rather than an action with stakes. So that's where it really lost me. Agents specifically. Let's talk about, if we're going to talk about the action, it's always related to who these characters are facing within the simulation. Agents are replaced with this kind of swarm. I think they call them just bots, and not only do I have some problem with it on a deep dive from a lore perspective on some things, I'm not going to go into it. You know what I mean? We're going to keep it breezing here. But it is functionally a very cheap zombie device. And personally, I felt the visual effects as a whole tied into the less action, the less kung fu, the less gung fu, and it's all just leaves me feeling it's just uninspired and very disappointed with it for that reason. It's very rough for that reason, and I can't stress enough. Like, I don't understand how a director can understand their movie so well and amp up every aspect of it for the sequel, like we see from Matrix to Reloaded, and then this is like the script itself is referencing the Matrix. The script itself understands the Matrix, and then they miss every mark on what the Matrix is. You know, I mean, I don't know. It's almost like I would want to say, hey, you do understand this is a dumb action film, but we need to make the action compelling, you know?
Right, of course, yeah.
It's just rough. I mean, it's like kind of no duh, but I don't know how upset you can get with something that's being, dug out of the ground many years later.
Right, right.
2 decades later. I'm going to end this, though, with, again, what my focus was for this rating, for this review. Specifically, is this movie worth your time, as it is always the focus of my review, but also, is this movie something you should watch if you've even deep dived and watched everything up until this point for the series? I think there is terrible pacing in this 2 hour and 30-minute runtime. So much more highbrow, for better or worse, is done in less of a runtime in these previous films. And while the first act is understandably slow, we kind of have to have very much a reintroduction to this world. And I think that's fine of what it does. And probably the most creative things are done with that. By the time we get to the second act, it is slowed down to a snail's pace. And by the time we get to the final act, there is a scramble. This film is absolutely scrambling to put the pieces together and make what we see this action film to be. It's just so disappointing and just such a poor use of real estate in the movie. I definitely think this score could go up with a fourth, a fifth watch, because I've watched it 3 times already.
Oh, you did
to
do?
dial this
okay.
in. Well, it's HBO Max.
Yeah,
our favorite non-sponsor.
Did you see it in theaters at all?
Once.
Yeah, I think it should be watched in theaters, probably, yeah.
Yes. But critically, I think this film only muddies the lore and the language of a great science fiction franchise. We are going to go ahead and give The Matrix Resurrections a 28.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
It's a bad score.
Truthfully, folks, it only went down with more watching.
Are you serious?
Where Dune was a lot of rewatches and to dial in, make sure I felt what I felt, this only cemented my bad feelings on it. So
28, okay.
Yeah. But what I would like to end with there, and we can transition into the end because we're running long. As far as my objective here, Matrix 1, a masterpiece, worth your time. Animatrix, deeper dive. If you're really loving it, maybe give the second and third one a shot. I think, honestly, avoid this fourth one. I pray it is not a new trilogy. I really do. I think that is probably the worst thing that could happen here. So.
All right, so Finn gave it a 28. Resurrections to 28.
Sorry, I ranted.
No, it's okay. Well, this is all part of it.
I'm passionate. You know what I mean?
100%. With that being said, though, I have a Tommy Two Shoes score.
Oh my God!
Okay,
a legit surprise. Wow.
So this is the only second Tommy Two Shoes that we have.
Amazing.
And just to give people an idea, when it comes to a movie I care about, I give it a rating between 0 shoes and 2 shoes.
I love the explanation. Wait, no, it's 0 shoes, 2 shoes, and then laces, right?
If I want, it's
like the point
if I want
5.
Caveats, I'll put in untied or untied laces.
Okay.
Matrix Resurrections gets 0 shoes.
Whoa. Wow. One moment we could probably be aligned on a score.
I was completely defeated and deflated walking out.
Wow.
Mommy and Daddy took my ball away, and I was not happy, is how I looked at it. I just wanted to make one joke. Trinity is introduced into the film with a MILF joke.
Oh, yes.
That's just to give people an idea. Love
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves like he's my older brother or a fun uncle. Worst, horrible acting in a long time.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's no stakes. It's absolutely it's Garbaggio. Bugs, I really liked Bugs, as you said. Blue Hair Girl, for those of you not going to watch.
Right.
But one caveat is I also really liked Morpheus.
Yes.
Aya Abdul-Mateen II, very cool
Yeah.
actor. Did a great job with Morpheus, so I enjoyed him and I enjoyed her, Bugs. And I think your 28%, Vin, is well justified.
There we go.
Well justified, yeah.
I'm glad.
And I'm sorry that you had to watch it 3 times.
My own doing, because I wanted to give it a chance, you know? And I have friends that like it, more importantly. So I want to see their side of the coin. But every rewatch, it just cemented my thoughts more and more.
Yeah, which is really a shame. But, can't say I was surprised, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's true. My hype was misplaced.
Yeah, this honestly...
I honestly should have been a little bit more healthy with my hype, honestly.
The real winner in this is Lily Wachowski not being a part of this. She won. She won.
That.
And I almost feel bad for Lana because it's like, what happened? Was she forced into it? Was it a thing of just like, well, if Warner Brothers is going to do it, I have to at least help a little bit to save...
Right.
You know?
Right. And this does tie, like I said, that behind-the-scene production, apparently this was therapeutic in some way for her to make and write. But, hey, I'm glad that maybe she got something out of it in that way. Again, I pray we're not getting more movies. Please, please, just no. Put it to bed.
All right, put it to bed. Now, Vin, is there any last comments you'd like to say, anything like to add, or we're going to roll credits here?
I think we're good. We've gone long enough.
Okay. Well, Vin, we appreciate you doing the homework. A lot of Matrix you did this week for us. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. And for everyone at home here, we'll just run down everything one more time. We have the original, the first, The Matrix at an 84%, The Animatrix at a 77%, The Matrix Reloaded at a 54%, The Matrix Revolutions at a 58%, and we have our newly released The Matrix Resurrections with 0 shoes at the Tommy 2 shoes and a 28%. We thank you so much for listening, folks, and we will see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating or tell a friend about us. If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value that you feel you received from us. You'll get a producer mention on the next podcast episode, too. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.